Thank you. So recording started, but basically on financial sustainability, what I wanted to chat about today, but I think that what we also would like to do is to open this up to your challenges, but to kind of start with partnership development. And the reason being is that we've done studies. We actually had a bunch of summer interns come in, and they did a full research study identifying for us that churches that had 12 partners became financially sustainable. So 12 is the magic number.
By
Go
partners,
figure.
are you referring to partners, other church partners? Is that?
Well, I'm going to throw that back to you guys. Like, what's a partner to you? Right, because that's the big question, right? Sometimes, is it just other church partners, or who else could it be? So Karen, who are you guys partnered with?
We're partnered with a community roundtable, Pine Ridge Community Roundtable. And through them, we've connected with some members in the community who are going to help us with our summer music concert series for the farmers market this summer.
Have questions, just,
Yeah, so that's neat, right? So that was basically a community association is a partner.
Yeah.
Right. Is there anyone else in your building that you've partnered with?
Well, there's a group that does English as a second language, and we're working with them, getting to know them, and they've been in our church for many years. It was just like this year that we sort of thought, well, we're trying to reach out to our community, and we have this group that comes to our church all the time, and we never talk to them. So now we've started a thing called Tea and Toast, where we sit with them and just talk, and so they're learning English, and we're getting to know them.
Right. So sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
And we already had an awesome partner or an awesome relationship and someone who trusts us and likes us.
Yeah.
And yet we never really explored how we could form a deeper relationship with them.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I really love where that could end up going. So, so really, Tom, I know you have some examples of different types of partners too.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your partners? Tom? Who are your partners?
My partners?
Yeah.
Oh, we have many. We have a lot of different social programming partners. Aspen, Momentum, local schools, St. Andrews United Church, coalitions, lots of different ones.
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of break down what Tom just said. Momentum is actually the government. So the city of Calgary, it's their, no?
Well, they're connected to the city of Calgary, but they're an independent group.
Right. But my point is it's actually public sector, more so,
right? Yes.
Right? So
and we work with a lot of public sectors, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and you have a lot of, I know you work with the school and the hospitals and health centers.
Schools and health centers and Alberta Health Services.
Yeah. So what's kind of neat is, and then you also named St. Andrews, which is obviously a community of faith. Right? So,
yes.
So Ron, are you mind blown yet?
Well, if you mean by partners, people that use your facility, we have lots of people that use our facility. We have the Cubs and Scouts. I guess you consider those partners. We have an Alcoholic Anonymous type group that meets here. The Hospital Foundation, they have their bridge meetings here and this sort of thing, but we don't consider us to be official partners with them. But.
Okay, so that's a great question again. Ron, you're on fire. You keep on giving me my questions. So my question back would be like, what's the definition of a partnership, right? So is a partnership someone who rents your building or is it something different?
Well, I guess if you're looking at a partnership in terms of somebody that's going to actually help you out in terms of finances or other social interactions or what have you, but most of the people
Right.
that use our church use it for free. We're not charging. Like they're community outreach type things. So
Right. So I'm going to throw it one way that I judge whether or not someone's a partner with me or not. So I always say, if I have a wine and cheese, do they show up? So if I run
probably
something,
the Cubs and Scouts aren't going to show up for the wine and cheese.
but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if I'm running a yard sale, if I'm running my bazaar, if I'm running like this big Christmas concert, do they show up? So it's interesting, right? Because a partnership,
Okay.
there's different levels of partnership, but really the question is like, are we in relationship with them, and are they in relationship with us?
Well,
Any
yes,
examples?
we're a
of
2-point charge as well, so we're in partnership with another church, and
See, like that's kind of neat. Like that's your real partner.
yeah.
Not to say that the relationships you have couldn't become partners. So any examples of that, of like one person that, like, I think Karen, your example is really great with the ESL group, where they were just using the building,
Yeah.
but then they recognized that wasn't a partnership, right? That was
Yes.
just a renter.
Right.
And so how can we be in relationships? So they created this tea and toast. Now,
Yeah.
Karen, you have a secret. So there's something else that ended up coming out of that. What happened?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. So what in the last time I talked to Kelly,
Yeah.
she was like, oh, now that I'm thinking about them as partners, is there more that we could do? So with the ESL, they realized that a lot of these new immigrant women who are part of the English as a second language, their job opportunity is probably going to be to start their own business.
Oh, the farmers market. Yeah. We haven't had
Yeah.
anything, any of them take advantage of that yet, but yeah,
Right.
that is an opportunity, is for them to become a vendor at the market. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So they started thinking, could we actually support these new immigrant women in starting their
Yeah.
own company?
Yeah.
And then we actually have this marketplace for them to have instant customers.
Right.
And so it's interesting to start from one place, move to like, how can we be in relationship? And then to actually start looking for opportunities.
Right.
Like that's,
Yeah.
I would call all of that like a partnership mindset. And how do we move relationships from one place over to the other? Anyway, those types of things really excite me, to say the least.
We are one of the many groups in the local Napanee area that have sponsored a refugee family. And that particular family, recently, the wife of the family put on a dinner at our church of traditional Syrian food. And it was great success. And she would like to do something like that as a business too. So I guess that's something we could look into in terms of helping her find a way to become self-sufficient through a business of her own.
Right. So what we're kind of identifying, thank you, Ron, again, is that that's a definition, like a criteria for a good partner would be someone who is in relationship with us. And what you also pointed out is it's someone who has, like, go with the energy, right? So what you just said is this woman did this dinner. She has energy for it. People came out. It felt like a success or a win. So like, let's continue to explore this. And then what I heard from Karen was the opposite, right? She goes, we thought that these new immigrant women would want to start their own companies, and we offered that, and no one's taking us up on it. So there was an energy. And both of those are fine, but maybe that's a good criteria of success of whether or not someone is a partner, or like how can you forward a relationship or not? Well, you got to go with the energy. You don't want to impose a relationship on someone.
Right. True.
So how else could you figure out if there's good energy in a partnership? Like what else could, like, I know, Tom, you had something really cool happen.
Which cool thing are you referring to?
I'm going to talk about, how about the coalition that you built, and how did you partner together? What did that look like?
The Bow Bottom Community Coalition is a partnership between Deer Park United Church, a Alberta Health Services, who provides funding, Deer Run Elementary School, Calgary Housing Project, and other people from the community who come in, and we have community times together to hear what people need, how we can address those needs, and then we do things to help address those needs within our community. Everything from running free summer programming for children to food security programs, just a whole host of activities that happen here that we also, when we gather people together, we build community. So we have community cooking classes. It's endless almost, all the activity that goes on here because of that coalition and people having vested interest in wanting to better their lives, get to know their neighbor, and reach out to one another.
So you've just already shown a lot of examples of neat ways to partner with people. Like you just explained, like you could do joint grant applications.
Right.
Right? That was one thing that kind of came from that. And the other thing that you could end up doing is promoting each other's programs.
Right. And really there are programs, the coalition's programs, because there were no programs before, if that makes sense. So we were able to respond to and fill in the gaps in a lot of areas. And doing that collaboratively, we couldn't have done it alone.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from that is two things. First, by partnering, you were able to create a sense of abundance as opposed to a sense of scarcity.
Yes.
So it created more hope. And the other thing is you didn't come to them with like, this is Deer Park's program and like, will you support it? You actually started with helping them have a voice and leadership in it and co-create it with them.
Exactly. Thank you for putting the words there.
I'm supposed to listen. No, but it's great. Like those, so what's kind of neat is I'm taking notes right now, but I'm hearing that actually those are great criteria of success, right? So relationship focus, going with the energy we talked about, but also creating a sense of abundance and possibilities together. And also to like not control it, like letting go of control is important.
It is. And a lot of our success too has been through the use of social media. We've been able to have people from the community simply call us, contact us, connect with us because they want to volunteer. So it gives them a sense of mission and purpose, whether they ever come to a worship service or not. And that also translates into, a greater pool of people to help with these various programs and outreaches. Right.
So actually partnerships is what allowed you to be church outside of Sunday in many ways.
Right.
Yes. You're allowing people who are seeking meaning making, and you're giving them a way to do it.
Right.
Wow.
It's crazy though. It's a work in progress.
No, it's not easy, right? Because
no.
retaining the relationships and then building the relationships is really tough.
Right.
Right? Because it takes time.
It takes time.
And so figuring out who to invest in and how to invest is really important.
And what we've realized too is working with a lot of vulnerable people, we find people who don't have a lot of social skills, or not the best of social skills. So just building those relationships and helping people understand how to live together and work together is a huge challenge actually. And especially when they come from different language backgrounds, different cultural, different religious backgrounds, are trying to figure out what a kosher kitchen looks like.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that there needs to be time in the relationship building, like change happens at the speed of trust.
Yes.
And I'm also hearing that there needs to be time to figure out what your shared values and shared goals are.
Right.
So what I'd like to do is like to start thinking about how do we, when we're talking to someone, figure out what our shared goals are, our shared values are as church with some of the neighborhood? So how have you figured that out? Anyone on the phone? Like even with the Girl Guides and the Boy Scouts, Ron, like what's a shared value that you have?
Well, just listening to the other comments there, another thing that we've been doing here is our Christian Ed Committee, along with a lot of other help, has sponsored a professional activity day. So when the kids are off school for PA days, we have a program here now that we offer. They can bring their kids here, and we keep them for the day, the entire day, from 8 in the morning to 5 at night. And we do programs, all kinds of fun things where they can do art and so on. But we also have a religious aspect of it as well. We have a little program to teach some particular Bible story or what have you. So that's been working out really well. I'm not sure how well it relates or in terms of expanding our financial abilities here, because again, it's not a moneymaker. It's more of an outreach program, but it does.
So, I'm going to invite everyone on the phone right now, maybe to start writing out, if you have a piece of paper in front of yourself, like maybe writing out who are the people that you have relationships with, and almost like and maybe what we could do is maybe if you put the piece of paper, actually I'll draw it. If we put the piece of paper on the side, like this way, and we could actually like say like a continuum of partnerships. That was really wavy. Maybe if yours could be straighter than mine. But like, this one would be like a renter relationship, and this would be like a great partner, like a strategic relationship or like a great partnership. And could you like plot all the relationships that you have, like from renter or like arm's length to good? And then when we look at these, we might start to be able to figure out where are there opportunities to like be more intentional about building a better relationship. So I think it's starting with like where are we today?
Cubs and Scouts.
Do you have any experiences? Oh, the truth. We have other random renters too. Like we have two babysitters courses coming up in the next couple of months. That's through the course. True, but they're not steady. No,
So
I wouldn't really say
most of these are either using the church for free, or we don't have a lot of relationship with them.
No, true. But maybe we should.
I think that's what we're aiming for, is to try to find the ones that are true relationships. But
AA too.
AA, I've got AA down here as well.
Yeah, you're right, Ron. It's like where do we already have great relationships? What can we learn from that? And then looking at the places that, you know what, they're not relationships. Like maybe, like I've seen some churches have great renters.
That's most of what we have, I think, is great renters. We don't have a lot of relationships.
So here's what's really neat is like ours is a relational God. Ours is a relational people. So how can we actually improve our relationships with everyone in our neighborhood, right? So let's say with the Girl Guides. So I was a Girl Guide for like 16 years. I actually was like a leader forever. I'm a huge Girl Guide fan. And I remember like we would do a lot of like cleanup days, and we would teach the girls how to paint or like use tools or things like that, right? And so if my venue that I had been at, and sometimes my Girl Guides was in a church and sometimes it was in a school, like wherever I was at, but I don't think we were ever asked what we could do in partnership with the place that we were. And yet my girls, like, and me, I would have loved to have painted a room. Like if I was a 13-year-old girl, I could paint your parlor. And I would have loved to do that.
Yep.
If you're in Calgary, I have a job for you.
So the key is, as people of faith, we know that everyone has gifts. And so everyone's gifts very different. And, you know, it could be a 9-year-old girl It could be an 80-year-old man, but we all have gifts, right? And so how, in terms of social justice, it's like, okay, what can you offer? Because it doesn't always have to be that we give space for free. And it doesn't, the key is it doesn't always have to be money. And in fact, often it's better when it's not. So when we look at this continuum, let's see areas that we think, or we can be creative on how to build a better relationship with them.
Yeah, I just moved our Cubs and Scouts up a notch or two because we do have some sort of relationship there where they join us at least for one service a year
Right.
in church, and I was just reminded that they're working on our gardens and flower beds outside and helping us there. And when we have cleanup
Right.
day, I think they come and help us as well during cleanup day. So I've moved them up a bit. It's more of a relationship.
No, right, and that's a better relationship. And I would go as far to say is when you're having these conversations with people, if they don't want to have the conversation with you, what do you think about that relationship?
It's not much of a
It's not a
relationship.
very nice one. It's not a relationship. I've seen a downtown church have a very large school that paid very high rent. But when they had, and my example is when they had a wine and cheese, this large school that paid like $60,000 a year didn't show up. Ever. And in fact, the first time, the church forgot to invite them. They're their largest renter, and they forgot to invite them. And so it was obvious that they were going to leave eventually because they never had a relationship. And yet, if you have that, you have a lot more stability collectively. And so they did leave. They ended up finding a new partner, and it's much better because they actually started with a relationship mindset at the very beginning. Oh my gosh, I see nodding even behind you, Ron. I love it.
This may be a bit off topic, but was this the United Church that had a wine and cheese, and was it real wine?
Yes, it was real wine. And yes, I know you're in Prince Edward County, so we're close.
We're close. But there's a certain percentage of the United Church population that doesn't think that any alcohol mixes with the church activity, whether it's wine or anything else.
Right. We started doing that recently, probably in the last year, using wine and getting a liquor license. We had a most recent concert on Friday night with a local group called the Heebie Jeebies. It's a male a cappella. They're a quartet, do wonderful music. And the social time with the wine and cheese was invaluable. It was a kind of a community event, a church event. And we have found that building in that time of intentional refreshments, as it were, is a great time for people to mix and to get to know each other. We have other occasional groups that book our space for concerts. It's a good place to hold concerts.
Right.
And the thing about that is we make sure we have information available about who we are. And one of the biggest things, I don't know where folks are on this call in the affirming ministries, but we're an affirming congregation. And it's interesting how many people contact us after coming in and seeing our affirming flags and logo and say, we didn't know there was a church that had rainbow flags. And just that kind of exposure to the community and making sure that we're prepared for that.
Right. So you've done a few things. Like you've started with like ensuring that the values of partnership and being radically open are throughout.
Absolutely.
So no matter where their first point of contact is, you can have quality control.
Right.
So I call it the partnership mindset, right? Like it's like, are you, and that's why I started with like, what are some of the best practices? Because it's not just the one person. And Ron, I love that you have a team with you because like it has to be throughout the community of faith. Otherwise it's not believable. It's not credible if not everyone's acting that way. So we always say like, can you say yes to everything first? Like who would you rather partner with? The person who says yes and, or the person who says, let me ask the board?
Yeah.
So and Ron's like, oh my goodness, so how do you get pre-approval from the board to be able to be in relationships with people? Ooh, that was a good one, Ron, eh?
I'm still back at the wine and cheese.
Come on down.
All right, we'll be out.
The other thing I heard from you, Tom, was you've recognized that one of, I'm going to use a business term, like one of the competitive advantages of being a church is actually all the relationships that you have. Because it's not just you to one, it's actually like network weaving. You've actually seen that the cross-pollination of relationships is actually another benefit of being in relationship with you.
Yes. And one event we had that was sponsored by our youth group, because in our Friday night youth drop-in, we have lots of kids from the neighborhood. And many of these kids have moved here with their families, many Africans from different countries in Africa, mostly Sudan and Ethiopia and places like that. And so they planned a huge night where they brought in the whole Sudanese community. And we had potluck, and it was great cross-fertilization with our church and the Sudanese church. And it helped all the people in our community feel that our place is a safer place to be and to come and to gather. And again, that was driven by, we did, I think we had a very fortunate thing happen. There's always good news, bad news. Bad news, one of our youth workers moved on, and so we hired someone else. And we hired a young woman from the Sudanese community. And she's just phenomenal. And so, to live out our values and who we hire as well is a huge statement to the community, so they don't just see, white faces in leadership. Mm-hmm. So we try to build on the diversity and inclusiveness as well.
Right. So I'm loving some of the things that are percolating. Is that oftentimes we as church don't believe or don't know why someone would partner with us. Right? So sometimes we go in and it's almost like we might assume that someone doesn't want to partner with the church. How many people have thought, I can't get funding because I'm a church? Like by granting organizations? No? Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't think
there's some of it, but not a lot, but there's some.
Yeah. I've had people say, because I'm a community of faith, like a community foundation won't fund me. I mean, Calgary is very forward thinking in that, which is great, but maybe in Napanee, that's more of a challenge. We've also, or someone doesn't actually want to have their theater company in our church because we're a church. And yet there's so many reasons to partner with churches. So I've been hearing about like the cross-pollination part would also be like, we call that social capital. So churches have, let's say, an average of, let's say, 100 members. Well, each person knows an average of 300 people. So we actually know
Is that
people
on Facebook?
everywhere. Well, on Facebook, it's like 500 people. The average person 20 years ago was 250 people. I'm sure it's more now. So, like most communities of faith that I speak to, the local reporter or the local owner of the newspaper. Like in Haliburton, where my cottage is, my next door neighbor is the newspaper. Do you know what I mean? Like we know everyone in our neighborhood. The second, like we also know the mayor, or we know our local counselor. Like someone in your congregation knows everyone. So I literally had someone come into our office yesterday and said, we want to partner with the United Church of Canada because no matter what community we're in, you know everyone already. And sometimes we forget that that's a reason to want to partner with us. Why else do you think that non-church partners or church partners, but why do you think other people might want to partner with you?
I think sometimes if they're looking for a rental space, we're a good deal financially for them. At
So
least,
the building, right?
yeah, we don't charge as much as other facilities.
Yeah, it's below market,
It's
right?
below market. Um,
Location is often good.
Look, yeah, parking here is free. We're in Calgary, so
Right.
you have free parking, and that's important and
Yeah,
accessible.
so location and building.
Mhm.
And we have weird amenities. A lot of places have commercial kitchens or like big kitchens, or
Right.
sometimes we have gyms. I was in a church that had a bowling alley in the basement. Like, but beyond the buildings, is there another reason why you would want to partner with a church? Like, try and think like them. If they walk in your building, what do they see?
Steady access, isn't it? Or, I mean, it's always somebody there.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
I was saying, it's always steady access. Usually you can get into it any time of the day.
Yep. And by the way, thank you for saying that, because that's not common.
No.
Often our doors are locked. So the fact that Trinity has their doors open is actually a beautiful thing.
It's not Trinity.
Oh, other Napanee Church.
We're the other one. Oh yeah, we're the other one. Yeah, we're Grace. And
Grace. Oh, right. Thank you.
We don't have our doors open all the time
But
either.
they're accessible.
No.
We have a
But you know what?
doorbell. Anybody can come in to ring the doorbell, but they're not open all the time.
But for Grace, you know what that means is you just identified something marvelous. You just identified that maybe if that's a better partnership mindset. Is there a way to have our church more accessible? My best example of this is St. Andrew's United Church in Markham. They decided to make their church available for social entrepreneurs and spiritual entrepreneurs starting their own business. The first thing that they did is they put on one of those real estate key locks.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, people could come and open up that. So it wasn't every door, not the 5 doors of the church, but one door they actually put the keypad in, so that all the social entrepreneurs had 24/7 access to it. And it was like that trust of giving access to the building in the people actually built the relationship. That was actually the turning point of the relationship. So you said it off the cuff, and in your brilliance, it's actually a great way to partner with people. Everyone should give him a round of applause.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. We have a key lockbox too, which is used by a lot of our users, because we find out giving keys to everyone, they don't bring the keys back, they lose the keys. And if you have the lockbox, then it helps out in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I have another example, another downtown church. They actually have a tutoring company that started using their space, and the tutoring company has like 100 teenagers as their clients. So it's crazy busy. And the tutoring company on Good Friday, well, they need to work on Good Friday because that's when kids are still studying. But the church was like, we're open on Good Friday, but on Easter Monday, we're going to be closed. So actually, you don't have access to the church. And the tutoring company's like, how are you not giving me a key? Like, and they actually said, not only can you not do this on Easter, but we're going to be shut down for May long weekend, which is the weekend before all the exams. And the tutoring company was like, this is not a good relationship, and wanted to leave because of this one thing. So by not having the partnership mindset and not thinking about other people's and like where they're at, sometimes we're doing a huge disservice. And so I had to get involved and tell them to get a lockbox.
Yeah.
Such a small thing, but so big.
Yeah, we can't expect people to meet those kinds of expectations. We have to be flexible so that they get what they need, more than we getting what we think we need.
More than we getting what we think we need. I love that perception is reality, and so how can we change our perception?
Right.
That's why I call it the partnership mindset. How do we act that way, and like how are we the preferred partner?
Right. And another thing too, when you have a lot of people in and out of your building and using your building, one of those things that takes the longest, and we still work on it here, is it's a whole different take on messy church. I mean, sometimes people do leave the church in a mess. Most users are pretty good about cleaning up after themselves, but things get broken, things get left undone, toilets get stopped up. These things happen, and to change the mindset of people to say, yes, these things happen in a heavily used space. Get used to it. Helping people realize that cleanliness isn't necessarily next to godliness. I think God's more dirty than clean sometimes. So getting that mindset shifted is important.
Well, it's not going to be perfect, right? I think
right.
But, and I'm going to add, is that a good partner does clean up after themselves.
They do, but things get missed. And like I say, especially when we're working with, people who are learning new skills themselves about space and about cleanliness, and, people who have to hurry out of here because they've got their kids and they got this and that. Sometimes things don't always happen. And so the patience, the slowness is important.
Right. And so this example of the Key Box, where this tutoring company with 100 students, I spoke to them, and actually I was able to speak to 2 of their students to find out, now that they're working at church, what did they think? And so what ended up happening is that one student said, well, I love having tea. And so I used to not be able to have tea in the old commercial place that they had rented. And now in the church, she goes to the one of 3 kitchens and gets her tea. And usually when she's in the kitchen, she'll interact with some of the senior women who are in the kitchen at the same time as her. And she's only 17 years old. And she's like, yeah, I've gotten to have conversations with them, and they'll ask me about myself, and I'll hear about what they're up to and their quilting circle or whatever it is that's going on. And she's like, the church is pretty cool, actually. So that's this 17-year-old version of church, and having tea in the kitchen with some of these, an intergenerational conversation, is actually changing her perception of church, but also giving her insight into these other people's stories. Another young man who is at the tutoring company, he said, well, here we used to actually fool around quite a bit, and sometimes we were mean to each other. And he felt like some of the other people actually bullied him because he's not as intelligent. I mean, he's feeling like he really needs the tutoring company, and so he's not always feeling as much self-esteem. But now that it's in a church, he's like, I've noticed that all the other students actually think about their behaviors and their actions more because we're renting a church. So it's really funny that this is a ripple effect of the relationship between, it seems so simple, and yet what's interesting is then when I talk to the church about, you need to give them the Key Box, because did you know these ripple effects are happening, and you don't want to lose this tutoring company because you're having a positive impact you didn't even know about. And so then we had a conversation about, well, we don't even know the positive ripple effects we're having. So how do we get these stories back to the congregation? So it became this whole new, the story sharing is maybe part of relationships.
We've got to share our stories. And sometimes I feel that we keep our secrets well to ourselves instead of, we don't like to boast, it seems, but there's a difference between boasting and genuinely telling stories of how people are being transformed and helped in our space. And there are many stories in many congregations, of that happening. And finding ways to be storytellers, to do narrative, is important. Yeah, and I try to encourage that when people come into my office, for instance, and talk to me about one of our neighbors that we've helped with a food program. And, one of our volunteers comes in and they talk about how moving it was for them. I try to get them to tell that story big, but then of course you have confidentiality. So you have to sometimes alter the story to make it a public witness or public testimony. But I encourage people to share those stories with their friends, Sometimes once in a while, a person is bold enough to do it at a worship service, of how something that they've been involved in has transformed their life. And so those storytellings, I wish we could get them happening more. Some people feel like it's not significant enough, but to go big with, and they need to know these little stories are great stories.
So when we ask the question of why would someone partner with us, like our story is important, our values have the ripple effect. The volunteers and the people in our buildings and outside of our buildings have the ripple effect of genuine relationships. We have donors. They've actually done studies showing that a nonprofit partnered with a church in startup phase is 5 times as likely to be successful than if they started from scratch.
Wow.
So clearly, church has something to offer in partnership, way more than just space.
Yeah, when there's the shared values, and that goes a long ways.
So let's talk, like, what is the shared value? I'm going to argue with you that the shared values between church and neighborhood is that the neighborhood's doing well. Vibrant neighborhood, vibrant community is a shared value.
It is, yes.
So it should always be easy to partner locally.
Should be easy, but some neighborhoods don't feel vibrant.
That's fair. That's fair.
They look around and they see all the crap that's going down in their hood, and the fear, the home and domestic violence, the problems with kids, the problems with drugs, that's very prevalent where we are. And so there's a lot of fear, but yet that's motivating people too, to want to be vibrant, to want to overcome some of these issues that they're facing. But they certainly don't feel vibrant. They feel like they're in a decline. They feel like they're in danger zone, that sort of thing.
Right. So having the conversations to determine if there are shared values and a shared goal, very important. In partnership, we usually think that there's 2 things. So you have that line of all the potential relationships and partners that we could improve. So one way to choose who to focus on and brainstorm further would be who does have the most aligned values and goals with us.
Right.
Like, can we see that? And let's start brainstorming about how to improve that.
Yep.
So
one thing that we try to do, the Calgary Foundation, which is a huge gift, will actually make foundations to small groups of citizens. And in our coalition and in our church work, when we talk to people in our neighborhood, and if they have a dream or an idea for something, we're able to help them apply for funding to carry forward their ideas. And that's something that is a real treasure for us. This summer we're looking at, there's a group of kids here who live in low-income families. Even though we're an hour and a half away, some of these kids have grown up here, they're teenagers. They've never been to our mountains. And they want to go to our mountains. So we have a certified wilderness person, myself, who's an avid hiker. The group is applying to Calgary Foundation to get them out into the mountains this summer, because that's something they want to do. And the church has said, sure, we'll partner with you in that, because we value nature, we value creation, we value getting out into nature. And so that's a really promising and exciting venture for this summer.
So what you've done is you determined that you had a shared goal. And then what you ended up doing is you realized, like, what's in it for both of us collectively? How do we both win?
Right.
Right? And so one way for you both to win is to have a joint program and get joint funding. Right? So sometimes we think that the only partner that we can have is someone who is going to rent our building, and it's only going to be a money transaction in. And so what happens is that if people think that that's all, like, if that's how we partner and that's the only way we partner, sometimes it feels like an agenda. Whereas what you've done is you've flipped it and said, we don't have an agenda. we just know we have the same goal. How can we partner?
Right.
So I'd love to brainstorm about how, other than a rental relationship, can we partner? So creating a program together is one way, and doing a joint application is one way. Is there another way that when you're talking to potential partners that we could offer partnership with them?
Can I ask a question?
Always, please.
I was wondering, is there anything in this program we're doing here on how to find partnerships to bring groups into the church? I mean, if we're going to look at both sides of the groups of, do we work together good? Do we have the same ideals and things like that? How do we get out there and find groups? I mean, are we looking online or what?
So, Tom, do you want to talk about the roundtable process?
I can, and several churches in Calgary have done the roundtable process where you bring people together and from the community, different community service providers, grassroots people in your congregation, and you talk about what's being done, what isn't being done, what are the strengths of your community, what are some places that need maybe attention in your communities, and you begin by having a series of conversations, and often an outside facilitator is brought in to help move those conversations along, and I have found that they've been very helpful. Karen, I think up at Robert McClure, we did community roundtable there, and I think part of that stimulated where you are now with your farmers market and other things. That's been several years ago.
Yeah, I think it actually helped to develop or start the Pine Ridge Community Roundtable. So yeah,
right.
And we developed a relationship with the high school by doing that. So
yeah. And relationships with schools are sometimes a little tricky to sustain because their staff changes a lot. But
right.
But it can happen, and it does happen.
Yeah.
So what I can do is I can send you the roundtable turnkey kit, Ron. I think I have your email. So
Okay.
If I send that to you, happy to answer any questions about it. But yeah, Calgary is really where we launched the roundtable process. I think there was about 16 churches, different denominations, who actually used the roundtable process. And from what I'm understanding is that Calgary is actually at the forefront of people understanding that communities of faith are an integral part of community economic development and neighborhood. It's been like just everything that I've been hearing. I mean, Momentum, Thrive, like the public sector get it, the fact that hospitals but it starts with that first conversation. And I think that Grace will be surprised by how many people, how many organizations are willing to have that conversation with you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about, I'm just curious, Tom and Karen, what size of a church and community? I know, Tom, you're in Calgary, so you're probably from a fairly large rural or urban area, whereas we're in a fairly small community here.
Right.
And Karen, I'm not sure about what size of a community are you in?
Well, we're in Calgary, but our neighborhood is Pine Ridge,
well. Okay.
and there's about 9,000 people in Pine Ridge, but our church is small. We just have, on a Sunday, we'll have like 50 to 60 people come to church. So
Okay.
It's a small church.
We're similar. We're probably 70 on average, I would think, on a Sunday.
It's
75 on average, and we're one of two United Churches a block apart, so which is a very rare situation. And Tom, what would you have for a normal Sunday?
Between the two congregations, St. Andrews and Deer Park, because St. Andrews several 6-7 years ago sold their building, and they've been worshiping collaboratively with us on Sunday morning. So between the two congregations, we have an average of just over 200 folks.
And you're in a fairly large community, I assume, as well.
Where we are located, in the south of Calgary, which is growing and is huge, there's ourselves and Red Deer Lake United Church, south of Calgary, pretty much. And I think Robert McClure is about the only church way up in the northeast. You're the furthest northeast, aren't you, Karen?
Yeah, it is the only church north of north of Highway 1. Yeah, in the northeast. Yeah. Yeah.
So your immediate neighborhood might have not greater
But
area.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it's much larger than just the immediate neighborhood. Yeah.
And in both cases, are your congregations largely elderly folks, or do you have some young families as well?
We have a mix, Ron, of families, and right now we're attracting more young families, which has been a blessing and a joy to us. And so we've done some new initiatives. One thing we've just done, we're having our second event in May. We have one in April. We had one the Sunday after Easter. But we've hired a family events coordinator to plan one community family event a month to reach out to families with young children. And we feel that that's going to be a very successful program. So that's what we're hoping for.
So you're actually seeing young people join or start coming to church more?
Starting to come to church and come to other events. And that's why we wanted to do more events, to invite them and to seek their participation in ways other than Sunday morning.
So you actually hired someone to coordinate this effort?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
So that's pretty exciting.
It's paying off, it sounds like, in terms of...
Well, it's early. It's like I said, just a second event. The first one was wonderful. There's a lot of excitement around the one coming up on May 25th. It's called Jungle. We have a group that's going to bring in some animals and some amphibians and things like that. So it should be fun.
Something to bring families together. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt there, Carl.
No, it's all good. It's good to get context. I think in terms of the main things I wanted to chat about today, so we're going to open it up for other discussions, but really I wanted to talk about the partnership mindset. I wanted to really ground us in understanding that 12 is kind of the point at break even partnerships, but once you hit 25, you often become vibrant and flourishing. So it's kind of like 12 is break even number for partnerships, but 25 is amazing. And just to understand, when we're talking about partnerships, how are we acting versus what we say we want to be, and how do we align that? Understanding the relationships that we have and how to improve them, but also how to to keep them or nourish them, right? So those are some other pieces.
What do you mean by break even?
Financially. So deficit budgeting would typically be before the 12 partners.
Okay.
After 12 genuine relationships and partnerships that you're co-creating together, you typically are break even. And then at 25, you'll actually often find a budgetary surplus. So
you're talking about true relationships, true partners, not just people that are using your facilities as a renter.
That's right.
And
that's right.
That seems like a lot of partnerships for a very small community to attain.
Well, I know Duncan, BC, so Duncan United Church in BC, which is very small, they have about 20, 25 partnerships. So it's how are you, the size, it does matter when it's let's say 500 people, but for Napanee, I would say that it's big enough to be able to work with you and with Grace and Trinity together in the place, both acting in the same way. I think that that's very hopeful. In fact, in many cases, we see that the more smaller the community, the more of a linchpin that the United Church acts. Estevan, Saskatchewan's been really interesting. The United Church there is running the entire youth group for all of Estevan. They're actually looking at doing employment training services. They're really the community hub. and Blackstock United Church in Blackstock, just outside of Ottawa, also very similar. They've become the community hub of a very small town. So, I mean, in many ways, we've seen rural and small town churches become even more of the backbone organizations in the community because there's nothing else there.
You know, I'm wondering about turnover in smaller areas. I don't know how that is, but I know in where we are, there's a lot of turnover. People moving in and out. Different staff from different agencies always changing, bringing people on board, and it's like we're almost always rebuilding that trust and those relationships. Because when one person leaves that we've had a good relationship with, that doesn't automatically transfer to their replacement. And so it's just ongoing, and it's constant change in our area. The face of the community changes quite a bit because there's a lot of low-income housing. Some people are able to move beyond the low-income housing, so new people come in, and so being that presence here, being that hub, which we are at Deer Park, is always changing. And I'm just wondering how that is in smaller areas. Are things more consistent? How is that?
I don't think there's as much turnover as you're experiencing.
Right.
We tend to lose people over time just from people passing on and so on, and there's a lot of young people that are joining to take their place. So, but in terms of people moving in and out of the community and this sort of thing, I don't think we have a large issue with that.
Right.
People are fairly steady.
I've seen the same thing in rural. So I work a lot with Community Futures Development Corporation. So you have the Community Futures in Alberta as well, and people who were executive directors 10 years ago are still the executive directors in most of those places until they retire.
Right. Okay.
We'd love to have more turnover, especially on our board, because we get to a situation where there's only a certain number of people to do the typical roles in the church, and as much as many of us would like to move out of those roles from time to time, there's no one else to take those positions, so we end up being in those positions for long terms.
We have that problem too, believe me.
Yeah, I'm sure it's everywhere.
So one thing that we've seen my own church has done is they actually created like a board of advisors of the partners. So what they ended up doing is like they have 35 different renters in our church, but there's like 9 core partners out of the 35 who really they've taken a lot of leadership on. And so they have a gathering once a month just to give updates with each other, to find synergies of ways that they can work together, but also to inform the church as well. So there's some creative ways of how do you and to me that almost sounds like another church gathering. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I wanted to get back to your break-even idea. Is that because your groups you partner with are people who are paying rent, or they're bringing other income to the church somehow? How does that work?
Yeah. So the main way it works is that you're basically the partner of the preferred partner in the community. You're also the preferred, the first person to hear about things. Like I would say, whenever there is like a new program that wants to be launched, instead of talking to everyone else first, they'd be like, could this happen at Grace United? Like that would be the question, as opposed to you become the first place. Also, all your programs start to gain more traction. Thank you. I'm glad that you've joined us. That's what's been happening. So it might not be direct, but the indirect and then the momentum becomes an upward spiral. The question, for partner versus renter, anyone want to take this?
Well, one thing I was thinking about that, we're almost at a maximum by the time we run our own programs and the coalition programs as far as space. We really are maxed out. But we have groups that we build relationships with because, like we have a strong Tai Chi group that meets here. They meet on Mondays and Fridays. And a lot of the people who do Tai Chi believe it or not, are also members of our congregation and other United Church congregations. It's interesting.
Right.
And so there would be as many as 40 people here on Monday and on Friday mornings. And we told the Tai Chi group when they started that, we wouldn't formally charge them any rent because we believe in what they're doing. And so what they've done to help, we said, let's, what can you do? So they charge a $2 drop-in fee, and that all that money comes to the church.
Right,
So
that's a creative way to partner.
And we do that with, we have a chiropractor in the office building, professional office building beside us, who has started running a seniors exercise class here. And they do the same thing. And that's
Right.
building lots of good relationships. And so no one's tied to a set fee. It's just whatever comes in, then they share with us.
Yeah, and so that's one way. And so that was like, for the question of how can you move someone along that spectrum of partner, that is one creative way to start that conversation going that way. The other thing is that you've really pointed out the question of how to partner. Partnership's not just about your space,
No.
right? So what I've seen in Winnipeg is this church wanted to run a program, but they realized that their space was actually limiting for what they wanted to do. They wanted to do an open mic, and it was with youth. And so what they did is they partnered with a local community center where the marginalized youth are, and that's where they hosted the open mic, right? So like at capacity in our building, well then what's next? We've actually seen another partnership, which is so weird but so cool, is food truck ministry. And what some of the churches have done is they realize, like, we keep on staying in our buildings. Imagine if we actually opened up our parking lot. And so they built relationships with local food trucks, and let's say 5, 6 food trucks will come once a week to their parking lot on a Wednesday where they have no other business anyway. And hundreds of people in the neighborhood will come. Musicians will show up, and like they have honestly, in Guelph, they have 500 people a week. 500 people a week showing up for food trucks.
That's an interesting idea. Thank you.
Yeah, so how do we take like what's available to us, right? So when we said, what do we have to offer? We didn't even, well, we said parking lot, but we just didn't think of parking lot that way.
Right.
So, okay, hang on. So I want to backtrack a little bit. You were talking about Duncan, BC, or Duncan, UC out in BC. So
yeah.
You had said that they have like 20 different partners. What partners, can you tell me what partners they have involved?
Okay, so I can't specifically say there, but I'll go somewhere else.
So,
yeah.
So, okay, so then my kind of leading on to that, I don't know how big the community of Duncan is, but when I think of us being a 2-point pastoral charge and the size of Napanee and the size of Deseronto is about 1,500 people
right.
population-wise, right? Our congregation there is about 23 people on average every Sunday. So, sorry, I'm just distracted by the gentleman in the back. That being said, that town, in a way, is dying. People are leaving. There's issues on a demographic and income, I guess, level is the way I want to phrase that. And businesses are moving out. So how do we try and pull partners in to a community like that? We started a concert series. Back in the fall, we had a Kaylee band come in and play. We have a blues and roots band coming in June. But how do we try and pull more groups in? We do have a Girl Guides group, an AA group. But with the population there, how can we pull more people in? But then on the other side, with Napanee being larger, how big is our population? 5,000? Okay, so we're about 5,000. We're also competing for, in a way, I'll use that word, competing for partners with the Anglican Church, the other United Church, the Catholic Church, and all these denominations trying to basically do the same thing. What do we do to draw them in here instead?
Okay, so so the two questions, I'll start with the last one. How do you make it about us? Right? So how it's not dividing up the pie separately, how do we make the pie bigger? So has anyone done a round table in Napanee yet?
Yeah, Trinity did.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Trinity
yeah, a
did?
couple years ago. Yeah. Trinity did a few
Okay.
years.
So the key to a round table is to not do it once. If you do a round table once and then you stop and you showed up to that round table, how do you feel about that?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. We're having a hard time following.
Okay, so basically if you go to a round table once and they pick your brain and they've taken your time for like 2 hours and yet nothing really happens and there's no follow-up from that, you typically will feel as though you're not in relationship with that organization that hosted that. The key to a round table is to host it regularly. So Tom, I know you host things regularly and you have what's the difference? Like what happens?
We have to host things regularly because, as I say, our community is always in flux. So just to get new people to the table, to hear new people, to keep building the relationships is important. So in our context, we have to work at continually getting to know our neighbor, I guess, because our neighbor is always changing.
Right. So as Grace, what you can do is say, we haven't done this for a while. And what we realize is that having it only, we want to have this regularly. And a big part of partnership, we talked about it, was letting go of control is actually a good thing. So if we kind of are the leaders for the first one, if the Anglican Church wants to host the second one and the school and the hospital want to host another one, just continuing to show up and be present, it's going to be helpful that people still see you as a leader within all of this work. And all of your work is improving the neighborhood. That's something that you can all agree on. It also means that collectively, you might find new ways, new programs to do together, or maybe one of your programs that's struggling, even though it's really life-giving for you, someone else also feels compelling and jumps on board with you. So it feels like a win, and as soon as you start having wins, there is an upward spiral to that. I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation with you guys about a round table and to answer lots of these questions. Is that okay? Can I leave? Okay, sorry, go for it, Tom.
Now, I would just echo what you said is, be consistent. Keep inviting people, keep having the conversations. It takes time. It's not a one-off event or conversation. And that conversation should build on themselves. Every time you have a community round table, let the group decide, okay, where do we go next? And then that gets them back to the table.
Yeah, so that's relinquishing control is actually have you ever heard love is like a magic penny, hold it tight and you won't have any. But it's like this, if you give it away, you get it back.
No, and I understand that, but it's getting the people in order to be able to do that. How do we, in a dying community like Deseronto, how do we get the people there? You know what I mean?
I'll go to that one. That's the second one, right? So that was the first one was Napanee, right?
Just excuse me, I'm going to have to bow out at this time. I have a funeral to plan for, so
okay.
So I can't stay the whole time. But thanks everyone
Thank
for the
you.
conversation, and I'll look forward to the next ones.
Great. I'm going to stop the recording.